Okay, and I realized in preparation for today that I hadn't posted the quiz. I wanted to update some questions on that, so you'll see that soon. The quiz for this week's reading is about the difference between user interface. You'll see the expression UI, which we talked about last week, and now UX. Okay, user experience, good. Okay, some people claim that user interface is just a part of UX. That this is the big idea, user's experience is the big idea, and the interface or the things that people see, right? Buttons and shapes and typography and all these things, that's just a subset of this thing. But the reading gets into a lot more detail and also some quiz questions with that. We're moving on to UX today, okay? And the big idea from Bubble that relates to UX is that of workflows. Okay, so that's the next option down in Bubble. So let's go ahead and jump into our test application. I did some work leading up to today, so we're just going to kind of rebuild what I've made before, but we're going to be focused on the second piece down, the workflow piece. Okay, so when I say user interface, typically I'm talking about the design button at the top on the left side. User experience, workflow. The workflow and data are tied together. Okay. A lot of the workflow actions that happen in an application only work because the data is set up correctly. The database, sorry. You don't always have to rely on the database when you run workflows. Right. You can also use something called custom states. These aren't the only two ways to use workflows, but let's just draw a quick distinction between these two to start off the class today. That we're going to create some action in our application based on how data is stored in our database. Okay. So an easy example of this would be something like the user is either logged in or not. Well, we need to go to the database to figure out who's the user, right? And compare that to who's currently logged in. Well, if the person's logged in and they're a user in our database, then they can do certain things. Okay, that's the workflow action. If they're logged out, they can't do some things. Okay, so that's the workflow part. Typically, you're going to see with workflows, the basic core premise of any application is an if statement. Okay, again, let's go back to the user logged in. If the user is logged into your application, then you should expect to be, to be able to do certain things. Does that make sense? Okay. If not, then they can't do those things. So the if statement is critical to all applications. It's critical to programming in general, right? The if statement is like the essence or core of programming. In workflow, I'm sorry, in Bubble, you're going to see the if statement kind of transformed into a when statement. You're going to see that language a lot more often. Well, ifs and whens are actually the same thing, just slightly different from a hardcore programmer's perspective when they might write a when statement versus an if statement. Okay, but you're going to see it more often written like this in Bubble. But just keep in mind, these, for the most part, and most uses of them mean the same thing. Okay, so when the user is logged in, do this instead of the word if. Okay, but for all practical purposes in this class, you can mostly think of them as the same thing. Okay, so we'll rely on the database. You also can process actions or more precisely save data on the browser itself and not in the application's database. And for that, we'll use something called a custom state. Okay, you'll also hear this expression called the front end, or you more commonly hear it called the client side. I know my writing's small here. The client side, let's call it processing. So you're making a workflow happen on the client side. Anyone familiar with this idea of client? What they mean by that when you hear that expression? Give it a shot.
Software that you're trying to that you're coding and stuff like that?
It actually refers a little bit more to who's running the software. Yeah. Good. The client that's trying to, the person that's trying to access the server, right? So this database sits on a server somewhere, right? In Tennessee, we talked about, okay? But you have a browser that actually can hold memory as well. But what happens when you, I'm going to log into Canvas here to prove some of these points. But Canvas is a web application, right? We all use it every single day. We normally don't think much about it. It's just a tool that we all use, but this is what we're building, a version of it is a web application. We have to log in, right? Authentication. Our user credentials are in the database that Canvas owns, right? That sits on a server somewhere in Tennessee. And when we go to log in, we're telling them who we are. Now we're logged in, right? So I'm the user that's active. I'm currently logged in. I click on courses over here and watch what happens. Right, this thing pops up from the side. Okay, we need to give the browser an instruction, okay, to make this thing come out from the left. And one of the ways that we can achieve that is we can say if statement, if the person clicks on this button, courses, okay, we want to set, you're going to hear this terminology a lot, if user does X, then set a custom state. And all that custom state is, it's like a variable. Like in mathematics, we're just going to call it the letter A. Okay. I'll try and erase and start back over from the top. Okay. So we're just telling the browser, hey, now the person's clicked on courses. So you know what? Create a variable called courses. And just save that in the browser somewhere. We just made up a new variable. We're gonna call it courses. Watch what happens when I click refresh. I'll just hit Control R on my keyboard. That might seem like nothing, but it's a big deal. What happened there? It disappeared. So why did it disappear in terms of what I was just talking about before? Use those words. Hit refresh. You're
the base of what the site should be.
Good. Okay, I'm going to keep building on that. It's going back to what just the page by itself, right?
With no instruction.
And use the word memory in your sentence. What happened to the memory? It was erased, right? So the browser was holding on to some memory of something. Oh, we set the state to course. So we're hanging on to the memory. Did it affect the database at Canvas? Nope. No new entry was formed on a database anywhere. The browser, the client, the client, was here saying, hey, browser, I want you to do something. So when I click on courses, I want you to make this custom state course. It's just a variable. We're just going to create that variable. We're going to hold it in your memory in the browser. When I hit refresh or I close my browser, it gets wiped. Yes.
Does that have to do with cookies?
No, because cookies actually stay more permanent. You don't erase them; they stay. So the cookies actually get saved in a different place, in a different folder. Yeah, concept's very similar. Yep, absolutely.
So is this also like if you sign into Google like Chrome, laptop, or another place that it remembers things about you? Is that
Very similar ideas, right? You're asking the browser to create a folder somewhere on your computer that most of us don't even know where the folder is, never even looked for it. But in that folder is a file saved somewhere that holds on to some of this memory. Absolutely. Same idea, right? Hang on to some stuff that I'm doing, but you can go into Safari or Chrome and you can say, erase my cookies, erase all of the history, right? Get rid of all that stuff. It's really simple with the custom state stuff where we just hit refresh. It's a more temporary memory, right? And it's meant to be used that way. And the number one application for using custom states is stuff just like what we're showing you here, right? You have options along the left, okay? And then you have content over here to the right, right? It might also be, imagine these were departments of a company and you only wanted to see the people that worked in finance. right? So finance was the first option here, and you click finance, and then it only showed you the people that worked in finance. Okay, so we want the browser to hang on to some memory of an action I took. All good there? So what I just described to you was the custom states side.
And the way that works is it creates a temporary file.
Yep.
And we allow that when we opt into that app.
It's built into browsers in general. This temporary idea is like built into the browser's technology. It was all part of the package when they built the browser and the web application functionality. Yep, so refresh is just wipes it all clean and then you move on to the next screen. It actually gets refreshed when you take any action. So when I click courses, okay, it's created that custom variable. It's showing me now this new element. We'll use the terminology from Bubble. It's showing me the menu element. And when I click a course, now watch what happens. I'm going to that courses page. All right, I'm going to a new page called courses. This 512118 signifies this course. Okay, so that's how it knows to pull the information for social entrepreneurship because it's tied to this number. Okay, we're going to build that today. And the memory that I had on the previous page, wiped. It's clean. I got rid of that custom state because I went to a new page. So it happens on a refresh and it happens when I navigate to a new page.
But it remembers your choices because you're logged in.
No, the application,
I mean, in this case, because it's only specific courses it's showing you, and those are when you're.
that part's going to feel more comfortable when we finish today. Hang on to that thought. You get that. We're going to come back to that today. Did you have a question about the custom state stuff?
I did, you did exactly what I was gonna ask.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
if you clicked on, if you did have the menu come out,
Mhm.
with the if then statement, if you clicked it, it brought you to the new page. What would happen if you press refresh? Well, I know now that if you press this, it's already has a new page with the 5,
Yeah.
1, 2, 1, 8.
Mhm.
It would just be that page that you refresh.
Yeah, so let's go through it one more time. So I click it here. I'm gonna go back to this course, let's say. Okay, so the menu goes away because I've cleared this state. And I'm now on this course, right? / courses, and I'm on the right appropriate course based on this slug, we're gonna call it today, slug. Right, the part at the end that identifies that course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody feel good about that? All right. Huge ideas today. You can do that stuff over here. It's custom states. You can also affect the database. Okay, so what might be an action for Canvas where we affect the database? I haven't thought. I'm sorry, go ahead. Awesome. Okay, so what would happen when you submit the assignment in terms of the language of a database? What do you think happens?
The file sent off to the server, which is the log of your profile, and then you, like professor, is going to be able to access that file and see what you submitted.
Awesome. Right, that file is actually uploaded to the server, right? Actually to a database that sits on a server somewhere in Tennessee. I'm just going to keep saying Tennessee. And it'll sink in at some point. Yeah. All right, so that's a change to the database, right? That's a workflow where when you click submit to your assignment, right, and you're uploading that file, the workflow is when I click yes or approve or submit or whatever, I want you to upload this file to that location. And I want you to change the database at that moment, right? I've made an update to a row where it didn't have a file before, now it does. Okay, awesome. Yep.
So like on Pinterest, you guys may not know, I relate to Pinterest.
There's probably some Pinterest users in here.
Me too. Okay. So when you have like your boards
Mhm.
and you're grabbing other people's ideas and you save to your board.
Yep.
You're not really affecting the database so much. Is that more of a?
No, you are.
You are.
You are.
You're saving it from your
Yep,
thing.
yep.
So that's not like.
I think you're gonna feel it after today's over. I think you're gonna feel the pen to your board feeling in terms of a database. It's coming. I think you're thinking exactly right. Right, when you're saving a pin, you're affecting the database. Yep. Okay, so let's go back to Bubble. And I went ahead and just stole the picture from Simply Recipes. I just did a screenshot and just dropped the picture in my page. I also made the gray just to be like, this is where a picture would go. Okay, so that's what you're looking at here. And you can kind of start to see it similar to their layout. You recall Simply Recipes is what we're kind of using as just a basic design. I asked last class for you to kind of try this out, to just make some boxes, right? And so if I made a gray box over here for this picture, right, just to represent that. I also just took a screenshot of this. That's one way you can do design, by the way, right? You just screenshot other people's stuff and drop it into yours so it looks a little bit more real. Here's what it looks like when I click preview. I haven't done all the best responsive stuff today, but that's okay. We'll come back to the responsive stuff. Today's more about workflows and UX, okay? So here we see, a picture could go here, just like Simply Recipes has the picture here, and they have this part here, and then they have this over here, which is the beginning of the workflow element, the beginning of the experience as a user of simplyrecipes.com, that when you hover your mouse over this, what are you expecting to happen when you click on that? Something should happen, right? Absolutely, because like, look at this, it's changing the look of it. So like you're expecting something's gonna happen when I click on that, okay? What do you think the person's even deeper? What are they expecting after they click on it? Right? Which is user experience, right? And also this is kind of a cool design in terms of a website or web app where when you go to simplyrecipes.com, you don't have to click on anything else. There's already a recipe in your face. That's a design choice. That's an user experience choice, right? Where they said, look, you come to our website and you already get to experience our product without having to do anything. I like that, by the way. Some people call it friction, right? The first moment where you actually experience the product. Some applications, it takes like 20 steps before you feel the very first step of, before you feel the first experience with the actual product. You've all, it's like signed up for something like this, like waiting to like, oh, we also need your birthday. We also need social security number. We also need like all these things. Yeah. Yeah. At which point, forget it. Right. So in this application, you get to the home page, boom, there's the value right there in your face. I click on bourbon barbecue meatloaf. Okay. Are you surprised to go to a page that says bourbon barbecue meatloaf and then it tells you the recipe? No, that's what you expected. You wanted to see a nice, oh yeah, let's get out of here. Let's go eat. Okay. I told you before, notice how all the pages have the same structure. First, you see the title of the recipe. Then you see a description of the recipe. Then you see who wrote it, when it was published, how many ratings, how many comments, a button to jump to the recipes. There's a nice picture, and then it goes into kind of a blog style format where it shows a little bit about, oh, you're probably getting ready for your family to come for Thanksgiving, and they're trying to explain, when is this a good meal for what occasion, and they're thinking through those issues. Yeah.
I'm looking at like the ads. So how would you put that? Like, that would be something you would have to contact.
I don't know the number on this. I would guess 99%.
But it's something like that.
Well, so here's what they use. They use Google's product called AdSense. Right. So if you do a Google search for Google AdSense, this is that's that box. Okay. Yeah. So if I go to advertise on Google, let's flip the roles around. So I'm advertising on Google, and I want people to see my product. Like, let me pick one out here. So OxyClean. Okay, OxyClean saying they're trying to reach people that they get messy, and right. So they make sense. It's a food connection. Google is doing the connecting. Right. So you're saying you work at OxyClean, and you go to Google and you say, Google, I want to create an ad, and I'm willing to pay this much for it, and put it on the AdSense network. Blanket it across all websites that have something to do with these categories. And then it just pops up on the site. OxyClean pays when I click on this, right? OxyClean has to pay for that. And the payment of that gets split up into Google, and then it comes, you get paid for saying, hey, Google, I want to do this,
They only
right?
get paid for that.
Yeah, most of them work on a per click basis. Yeah. Some I think do impressions, right? If it just shows up on the screen, but I think it's more common that you pay when, okay, clicked on it. All right. A lot just happened right there, right? Pretty cool that it takes me right to Amazon, right? And there's a little bit more value in this that I'm now taking right, hopefully, to the product. That's, least the categories, it's good. But Simply Recipes gets a cut of that. And that's how they make money.
How much, like, penny, 5 cents?
Yeah, this is like, in some cases, fractions of 1 penny. Yeah, because you have, yeah, you need, like tens of thousands of clicks to like start making money. Yeah. Remember, Simply Recipes gets 14, 15 million hits on their website a month. Okay, so that's how these advertising models work.
What if you make something like catchy, something else, like press it on,
Hmm.
see your product?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It makes sense, Samsung, right? When you're looking at recipes. So the more they make sense, the better, but very few people click, but it's enough to make the model, the business model work. Okay. I think for this class, we should probably stay away from the advertising and do more blocked content, like premium content. If you want to watch something, pay for the extra thing. That'll be our first kind of technique, but certainly you can make money this way. Okay, so let me jump back to my version. Okay, so I've created a quick one, right, just to mock it up so you can kind of see what's happening here. We're going to try and do this today as a group. Okay, we'll see if we can get it done. Quite a few steps involved, but here it is, the recipe. I just went ahead and put the same words, right? So meatloaf, you can imagine that nice picture of meatloaf right there, and the title here. I didn't add in all the details, but 40 minutes, I just made up the time. But if I click on this, what are you expecting to happen? Okay, it's going to take me to the page recipes. And not only that page, right? So first things first, it's going to take me from this index page to the recipes page. Okay. And then the / the slug, the part that comes at the end, is going to be unique to that specific recipe, which is meatloaf. Okay, so I click on that. I say, okay, this is the recipes page. I put this on there so you all would see it, right? You wouldn't normally do that for the user, right? You don't need to tell the user like this is the recipes page, but I put that for you guys. Okay. And the title of the recipe that I clicked on was bourbon barbecue meatloaf, which I'm just proving to you that it worked. Okay. Because what if I clicked on the other recipe? It shouldn't say bourbon barbecue meatloaf, right? Got to move this thing out of the way. Okay, so just to prove to you that it's working. By the way, this is how apps are really built. Like you shouldn't keep going, building and adding all these things on until you've actually tested that when I click on barbecue chicken, it takes me to the recipes page and it says barbecue chicken and it gives me the right recipe. Right? Because if you keep building and you think you're done and then you go back, you don't know when you made the mistake, right? So it's good practice in software development to along the way, test it, make sure it's actually working as you expect it to. Okay, so we're going to try and do that today. Let's see how far we can get with something a lot simpler first. Okay. So what I'd like for you to do is try and make this with me first. This is kind of like step one, the baby step. And then we'll try and do the more difficult one when we finish today. Okay, so the first thing we want to just try and do is hide and show elements. Okay, we want something to go away or show up. Okay, so like this is a hide the element, makes that thing go away, right? And clicking on this makes it come back. All good? That's on the same page. We're just making things pop up and go away. Then we'll try and do just go to the recipes page, right? And then we'll layer on the last part with the change of the database. And then we'll try and do this custom states thing. All right. So let's go to the recipes page. I'm sorry, the index page. And I don't care how you're going to make it look today. I just want you to do the exercise with me. So like your page can look however it looks. I just want you to try and make these buttons. Okay. So don't worry about how anything else looks, if it's responsive or not. You're just trying to make these buttons with me today. All right, so the first thing we need to do is just go and get some clear space. So maybe just make the page bigger and give yourself some room to work. And we want to put in a group. So all I do is click on the containers and click group. And I'm just going to click and draw and make one, fairly large. This one's 270 pixels, 76 pixels in height. You can make it whatever, just somewhere in that neighborhood would be good. Okay, remember just the title of the group is important later on. Right now it's group J, it's fine. We don't really care. We're just trying to do something to prove we can do this step. Okay, inside of this group, we want to put another group. Okay, and it's not going to be, here, let's, instead of doing another group down here, let's use a text item instead. Okay, so inside the group, let's use a text item and just drop it in there. Now, remember, you have to be real careful here. Okay, and at least the way we're designing this and the way I've instructed you to, is I wanted that text box to be inside of this group. If that red line is not showing for you, the only reason is you don't have the grid, you don't have the borders set. So all I did was click on grid and borders, and then I chose the show element borders option. And you can change the color. All that does is it makes that box look red when it's on the page. The reason I have that turned on is so I can see what I'm doing. I see where the edges are of things. Okay, so I dropped in the text. What's that? Grid and borders, and then show element borders, like the 6th option down. Yep, and you can change the color if you want. Okay, so we have the text in. Let's double click on the text to bring up the editor. And let's click once inside this part over here to actually, backspace and change out the text. So we're just going to say this is a quick example. And let's rename the elements, the text element from text whatever to just text example. You can hit enter to make that element stick. Again, reminder from our UI lesson last class, if you click on the elements tree over here, you'll be able to see that, if I clicked on group, whatever the group you just made was, for me it was group J. If I click on that, you're going to see the box, and you know that this text is inside of that group because if I click on the plus button to the left of group J, you'll see the text example. So you know that that text example is sitting inside of that container. Okay, so this is a quick example. Now let's go make 2 buttons. Most of the workflow stuff that happens on Bubble is going to happen typically with a button, right? Like you're clicking a button to do something. So let's go down to the second option for button and just make another one inside here. So all I did was click button here on the visual elements, and I click and drag to make a button. Doesn't matter the size. I'd like for you to keep it inside of that group. And let's rename it to hide the elements above. And when I say above, I just mean that text that we just created. We're going to try and make that go away based on a user's action. Okay, so someone tell me the if statement.
Then it wakes the box.
Okay. Make the text box go away. All good? All right, let's make another button. Yeah, let's make it button hide. The naming is only relevant to you and the group and the team members you have working together, right? That you were all on the same naming convention. You all agree how you're going to name stuff for later on. Yeah. Not yet. Let's make another button first, and then we'll go to the conditions. Yep. So let me just make the second button here, and I'm just going to make it bring it back. We're bringing the button. And how about button back? Okay, now we have 2 buttons. Now let's go into the actual workflow part of it. How do we give that instruction? How do we write the if statement? So we're going to click on this hide the element above. Okay, and you're going to notice that one of the options in your editor is to start edit workflow. Okay, all that's going to do when you click on that is take you to this button right here, to the workflow section, but it's going to be specific to the button, to the element you just clicked. So that makes sense. Like it's better to do this over here than it is over here, because you want to select the element you want to modify first and then click on start edit workflow. Now I'm in, right? Now I'm in the logic part of the application where I'm saying the user's experience is going to change based on actions they take on the page. So how I do that is I click here to add action. Okay. And we're working, remember, with elements. Like the text is an element, right? A group is an element. A button is an element. These are all types of elements. We're working with elements, so we're going to the element actions one. And what do we want to do you think? We want to hide the elements. So we want to click hide. And it's going to bring up the option for what do you want to do with that? Which element do you want to hide? Well, if you named it nicely, which we did before, we put the word hide in the element. So we can actually just, click on that and start and do a search for hide. Or you can just look for it, right? You can scroll down and look at all of your elements and you can look for the button that's hide. And when you move your mouse over it, it's actually going to show you, this is kind of a nice thing that they do. They show you what the element looks like. They give you a preview of the button that you were trying to mess with. I'm actually, I just realized this is a good thing I'm showing that because we don't want to hide the button, right? Right, we want to hide the text, right? So I just caught myself in looking at that suggestion that we're not trying to hide the button, we're trying to hide the text. That is, this is a quick example. Okay, and we named it example, right? Okay, perfect. So this is what we're trying to hide, text example. Okay, you can set additional conditions if you want. We don't need them right now, but you could say only when the current user is logged in. We don't need to do that right now. Okay, so we're good. We can go back to the design option. We're back here on this page. Before we fix the whole thing, why don't we just go ahead and click preview? Remember, this is the staging environment. I talked to you guys about like Canvas and how the FGCU website, how it works. You get to see like a preview of the FGCU website on the web dev site first. This is what this is. It's a preview. It's the development staging area where we get to see our edits. Okay, so let's scroll down. You should see this button somewhere on your page. Okay, and when you click on this, does it make the text go away? Okay, now click on the bring it back. All right, we didn't tell it to do anything, right? We made the button, but we never told it programmatically the if statement.
Do you have to have colors?
The color? You can make the color whatever you want. Yeah, you can change the colors or whatever you'd like. Okay, I can show you different ways to change the colors.
Do you have double click into there?
So when you double click on the button and you scroll down, you're going to see that they gave you some default ways it should look, right? The quickest way is you just say, okay, remove the style. So get rid of the default settings for that element. And let's go down. This is the color of the text. Let's go down to the color of the background. And you could click on that and change the color of the button. Make a big red button. The reason they do the default is they're trying to prompt you, like, don't do this. Like, don't go in and change a whole bunch of things, right? Because you're going to have colors on every page and not be consistent. Like, define one that you want for all your buttons and refer to that one. Okay, so let's get back to the UI coloring stuff in a little while. Let's focus on the workflow part. And so we did the hide the above element. Try and get it to come back now. So I want you to go to this button and set the workflow to get it for the element to show up. Okay, so what would you do? You click on the elements. You need to go set the workflow. Okay, it says when instead of if, right? It says when the button back is clicked, I want it to do something. I'm gonna click here to add an action, and I'm gonna go down to element actions, and I'm gonna show, okay, the example text. Okay, I want it to show that. Instead of hide it, I want it to show up. Okay, we can go back to preview. And when we click the hide element above, it goes away. And when we click to bring it back, it comes back. Does this look familiar from what we just did with Canvas?
That's like, so that's a show and hide in the same place.
That's what we just built, right? Okay, so this is a really cool one, right? We could make the button be a toggle button. And that's the word we use for that situation, toggle, right? We want to toggle the element, we want to show or not show based on whatever its last state was. So this is state visible, right? State is course visible. And it should go away when the state course visible is yes. I know I said a lot there, right? But we like create a variable called state, the course is visible, and we set the variable to yes. Okay. And then when we click on it again, if it's already yes, then we want it to change to no. Right? When you start doing this work, the workflow stuff, and you get deep into it, your brain spins, right? Because the logic of an application makes your head spin. You go 3 steps in, you're like, wait, so if the user's logged in, and then they do this, and then they do that. But if they don't do that, should that happen? And you almost have to have a whiteboard like this up where you're like drawing out the paths, right?
Yeah.
Like the tree. Okay, what's gonna happen? Okay, first it does that, then that opens up 3 things. And if those 3 things open up, then that's gonna open up 9 more things. And it's like impossible to do without visualizing the actions. Because you'll forget one, inevitably, you'll forget one, you know. This is the most simple example of a toggle. Show and hide. Okay, so that's what you just built. Of course, you'd have to design this, you know, this window that has courses in it and so on, but that's what you just built. Yeah. Yeah.
So like I'll click on like that and it won't do the step 1, like which is either hide or show.
Okay, let me come take a look at your computer and see if I can work through it. I want you all to try the next step, and then I'll troubleshoot back there. Try and set a workflow where you go to a page. So I'll set the make a new button. Okay, so first go make a new button, and I want you to set a workflow where you navigate to a different page in your application. You now have the skills to do it. You just have to go find out what the option is. But you have the skills to figure out how to like navigate to a new page. Yeah, if you hit Command R to refresh the page, that makes bubble work again, you know, where it gets stuck. But you should definitely expect when you click the workflow, you'll always see that option for your steps. Yeah. That's fine. Good. So what we're in right now is we're just learning software, so you can make it look better. No problem. So. Scroll down to right here, new style, and then you can start playing those.
Yes, that's fine. User interface. There should be a.
Okay, can I get a show of hands? How many people figured out to navigate to a page? Okay, awesome. About half. Okay, so all we did there was create a new page, and we called it, you know, whatever you want, like navigate to, I'm gonna say the recipes page. Okay. And what we want to happen, the experience to happen, is when a person clicks on this button, they go to that page. Okay, so I double click on that, I go start edit workflow, I click here to add action, and it's the navigation window that you want this time. Yeah. You don't have to right now. We may shortly in another case, but this doesn't matter for it. Yep. So navigation, go to page, and we're going to say the recipes page. By the way, if there are no pages that exist, you can just make a new one here, right? You could just create a new page and say you didn't have one in your app, so whatever, make a new one. But the existing one I have is recipes, so I'll do that. Okay, some important things happen here. Okay, did you all see that last step? You're good there? Okay, so I'm going to recommend for what we're going to build in this class a different option than what I just showed you. Right? This is for when you do a simple navigation. You're going to a page and it's simple. What I showed you before about going to the page, recipes page, and then getting the barbecue to be the first thing up, that's a little more complex, right? More steps involved. Because we're trying to go to not just that page, but we're also trying to go, once we're at that page, we want you to show the right recipe. Right, there's more going on there, and I showed you before, it's just all that happens after the end of the URL. That's the magic piece, right? Yes.
In here, are there those buttons that like when you went to the recipe page, it said like go to recipe, like once you got to the page, you click it and pretty much it like shoot this.
Oh, yeah.
all the way down?
Yep. Yep. So we could take a look at that too. So what he was saying was right here, there's this button right here. Right, we want to move down to just the recipe. Okay. Those buttons are hit and miss. They're called anchor tags. They're hit and miss because sometimes they take you like to the right spot. Other times I've seen it where you still have to, you notice that? You still have to go on to look. From a UX perspective, I'm not huge on those because they don't work consistently well. What's happening though is there's a probably too much to get into, but it's just you set the mark in the code of like where you want it to drop to, and for some reason when it does it, it doesn't set that to be the top of the screen. So I'm not sure the technical reasons for that, but we would have wanted it to go to right here. Okay. Also notice just real fast when you click print, look what's happening here. Okay. The page is recipes / bourbon barbecue meatloaf. As expected, / question mark print.
But why does it only pick like what you have and not the whole entire page?
You mean this right here?
Right, when you were over there and it hit print, like isn't that the page that like the URL that says recipe for
Oh, sorry.
that whole thing? So why isn't the entire page that we were just on instead of the recipe not being printed?
They set up a new look and feel just for printing stuff. So they made it that way on purpose. So that it's now formatted as well as it can be, so that when someone goes to print this web page, it actually shows up okay on a 8.5 by 11. Right, we need to do the same thing on our app. Like we need it to look just like this so that when you go to print, it does look, because most people will probably end up, well, not most, a fair number of people will go and print the thing and write notes on it, you know? So yeah, so when I go to Control P now, it actually, the preview looks good. Like it doesn't have all the garbage on the side and so on. Yep. So they want it to be that way. It's not perfect, but you know, it looks pretty nice. Okay. Yeah, so it chops off everything.
So
Yeah.
it just chops it.
Yep. And they designed it that way on purpose. This is UX stuff, right? It's like, it's just easier to read the recipe by itself. Okay, so let's go back here and just to kind of talk through that last point. So we click on navigate to recipes, let's go edit workflow. Let's go look at some of the options here. So instead of being go to the page, we could go, maybe it's this one. Scroll to, yeah. Okay, and the offset is to that offset that I showed you. Remember I had to scroll down? That's the offset. So it's like, take me down to that part of the page that you want to take me to where the text starts here. And if you want, you can offset by 50 pixels. So they still have to scroll down just a little bit. So that's it. That's the technique. So great question. Okay. Okay, before we try and tackle this challenge, because this is a long one and a lot of steps involved, okay? Let's do the custom states thing, okay? Let's create a new button. And let's say set a custom state is the name of the button. Okay, so we just have a new button called set a custom state. That's the action we want to happen when a person clicks on it. Remember, when you are doing this, setting the custom state, on that particular page, good example is something like this, where the person clicks on this option. Just like camps I showed you before, right? Sometimes you see it laid out like this. The person clicks on this option on the left. And what we're doing when we say set custom state is we're saying, okay, browser, create a new variable. Let's set it to A, doesn't matter what it is. Let's call the variable A. Okay, and let's give it a value. And the value might be yes. Right, that might be the value. The variable name actually could be A is visible. That might be a better way to describe it. So variable A is what we want to create. Variable A is visible. Right, so we created this new variable. We call the variable A is visible. And we set the value to yes. Okay. Just like in mathematics, you say A is 3, right? Same thing here. It's living in the browser. It only stays living for as long as the person doesn't hit refresh or go to a different page. When they hit refresh, what happens? Bye-bye variable A. All good? No change to the database. Just create a variable in the browser or client-side processing, right? To make that variable, to hold on to its memory, and for the reason of wanting to show. So what would happen is when a person clicks on this button, you'd show this content here. Okay, so let's say it's a list of people that work in HR. Okay, the next box is finance. So the user's experience should be, well, when I click on the finance option, it shows me the people that work in finance, not HR. So we'll just swap these people out. It would just get rid of, it would actually hide this element, right? If you go away, hide it, and then show the element for finance. Right? It's like magic, like a visual trick, right? Hide this one, and I click on that button for finance, hide what was showing before. Okay, so it would actually set the variable A is visible. It would set it to not yes, but no, right? When I click on this one, and it would set B is visible. That's the finance one. I would set that to yes. Does that make sense? I know I've like thought of, there's a lot going on there. Okay.
Basically, what you're saying is there's gonna be 2 buttons. So let's say we use the one year X and then variable A, okay?
Yep.
So we click on variable A.
Yep.
And it's gonna say show variable A,
Yep.
but hide B and C.
Yes, that's the action you want to take. That's the workflow. So the workflow is if I click A, hide B and C. If I click B,
Hide A and C.
hide A and C. If I click C, hide A and B. Right? All good? That's the workflow. That's the action.
So you can make that would be a button.
Yep.
correct? So you can make a button have a show hide at the same time.
You actually, you don't have to make it a button. So it can be a group,
Okay.
right? So we could say like, we bring in a group and the group contains an icon. That's the more common thing in people's experience today is the group is a picture of a clipboard or something, you know, like, okay, when I click clipboard, then that's going to be the giveaway for HR. Okay, for the people walk around clipboards. Finance would be like a number. It would be not a number, like a currency, like a dollar sign or something. So when I click the dollar sign, then do those actions. Yep. Yeah, Julie.
So, going back to understanding the,
Yeah.
what do you call it, state custom?
Custom states, yeah.
So, like when you see AdSense ads, and like, you're reading an article and you click off of it, and sometimes it happens to me, I see an ad, and I'm like, oh, what was that? And then I go back, it's gone. Is that because I cleared my?
The AdSense stuff's different. Yeah, that's a Google thing. Google controls all of that. They're gonna rotate in new ads.
That's not really like, because I left that browser.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to explain that one. Yeah, that's Google's working. What happens inside this box is a Google wonder. It's how they make gajillions of dollars a year. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure on that one. Yeah, they're able to see your browser history and all that stuff to figure out how often they should rotate ads and who knows. I mean, that's
But
complicated.
That's because they actually own the browser that I'm using, and they have the rights to see everything. I do.
No, Google, you can use AdSense with any of the browsers. You don't have to use Chrome. It could be Internet Explorer, can be using Google's product as well. Yeah, the ad part is tricky. A little past my area of expertise. Well, definitely past it. Does everyone feel good so far? Okay, so let's make the action. Okay, so no. So we'll go to set custom state and start edit workflow. And we want to click here to create an action. Okay. And we want to go down to element actions. Okay, and we set the state. Okay, most often in situations like this, we're setting the state for the entire page. Okay, so the element is the page itself. And the page that we're on, at least the page that I'm on, is the index page. So if you're on the index page, you're going to see index right here. So we're actually setting the state for a element, which is the whole thing, the whole page. And now we want to create that variable. So we would click here for create a custom state. And you can make the variable whatever you want it to be. So we could call it, HR dash is visible. It depends on your situation, what you would call the states. It just is relevant to whatever you're doing and how you do it. So we're going to set it to text, the variable type. And the reason that we're setting it to text is because this word right here, no, is text, right? It's not a number. So we could set it to 1, right? We could set, some people do 1 and 0 or yes and no. Since I used yes and no first, I'm saying we're using text as the variable type. So we'll just click create. Okay, now we need to tell it what the value is, right? So we just made the variable, the custom state, HR is visible. Now we need to tell it what the value is. In our case, I said yes and no. Okay, so we could just say HR is visible and yes. Now we just set the value of that variable. Okay, so I'm going to remove A and call this HR for the HR department is visible. I set the value to yes when I click on that button.
Shows the value of yes.
Yes is only relevant as you make it relevant. I know that sounds like hard, maybe harder to follow right now, but it's only relevant later on when we do the rest of the logic. Because we'll say, look, only show this element when it's yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we could do do's and don'ts.
Yeah,
almost in
you can
this
make that
scenario.
anything you want, right? You could make it like the word ketchup, right? It could be like index HR is visible and the value is ketchup. Because when you want to show the HR group, you would just set it to ketchup, right? Yeah, I'm trying to be ridiculous. It's best for programming principles to do like yes and no and try and have like basic English here, like, okay, so that someone came into your app, they'd be like ketchup, like, what does that mean? So we try and be as straightforward as possible, knowing that some people that are working on the development of the app may or may not follow your logic or follow your naming convention. So you'll notice here, like when we set the state, nothing actually happened, right? Nothing happened visually. Okay, because all we did is, let's go here back to the design and click the preview button. When we go click on that button, oops, set custom state, nothing happens. Okay, let's think through that. Let's think through why.
We never told it what to make this.
Exactly, like we never made this group down here. We never told it what the thing should be showing is. All we did is say, okay, when you click on this button, create a variable, call it HR is visible, set the value of the variable to yes or no, okay? But we never gave the final instruction, which is like, this is the thing that we want to show. Just for today's purposes, let's just stop right there with that idea in terms of the custom state. You now know that you could go the final step. You could make this group that's supposed to show or not show. Basically, we didn't make this, right? We didn't make the example text to go away or show up. Okay. The last step, the most important one, the one that's the trickiest, is actually going in and changing the database. Okay, so we're not just creating a variable in the browser now. We're actually going into the database of the application and changing a value in a row, in a column. That's tricky. Okay. I have to talk and explain a little bit about how databases are set up, first of all. I can't, get into making this. I'd be skipping a step if I didn't explain the database part. So let's dive into this database section and actually take a look at what's happening here. Okay. So I'm just going to erase these. Actually, you know what? I'll make a new one with you. So I want to leave what I pre-built intact. So I'll try and rename it as something else. Okay. So when you're creating a food app, it's pretty obvious that you have recipes, right? Like this card is a recipe. Let me erase this. I hope we're okay with the notes for all this, but when we get into the database part, I really need the board. Okay, so try my best here for clarity's sake. So we have a user. Bubble calls these a table. Right, this is a table. Okay, I believe that's the terminology they use. Maybe they don't use table throughout. They call it a type. You can think of a type I think most people would think of it as like a table of information. Okay, so when you see that word type, that's probably the best way to think about it. So a user, when you see a data type, you should think of a like box, right? And you should think of rows and columns. So the first row is just going to say what everything is. Okay, so the first column of user would be something like what do you think? When you're explaining who a user is, what are you keeping track of about a user? Username. Good, right? Their username. Some apps use username, some apps don't. Like you Twitter, you have a handle. Some apps they don't care to use a username. In fact, for the recipes one, we probably wouldn't use a username. It's not really that relevant. What else would you keep track of a user? I think I heard password and what they like. Okay. The password's a special one that Bubble takes care of on their own. So we don't have to make that and worry about the password, which is nice. Right? They realize that passwords are a really common thing, so they just take care of it. So we don't actually have to set that up. Likes. How about saved recipes? Are we on the same? Okay.
Yeah.
So saved recipes. They're likes.
And would we be able to like set up that like it would show like similar recipes, like if they really like dessert foods or whatever, like will we be able to show more to that?
That's a great question. We'll try.
Okay.
Just make you categorize it in the database, like rows X through Z are all desserts, so instead of clicking this and show them.
Okay, so
I don't know how the coding goes.
we're on it. We're on it. So you're saying the recipe should be in a category, right?
Yes.
Yes. So instead of putting category right here, that doesn't make sense under user, right? Okay, let's break this out. Let's be real careful there, okay? Because what you just said is a new table.
New database?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think they're all in one database. I think when you click on data, you're technically in one database. I think. I don't know the answer. Like a person in computer science would answer that question better than me. But let's think of it here as another type or a table, just as they use the language. Okay, and we'll call it category. You see, I've already done that on our app here, right? Okay, so the first column of most tables is the title. Okay, so what would be an example of a title category for a recipe? Right? In fact, what we used on mine was meatloaf, and what they used on their app was meatloaf, right? So let's go back to the recipes app. See how they put the word meatloaf there? This is a category of recipes, right? Quick dinners is a category of recipes that are quick. Okay, so we have another table called category, and title is meatloaf. I know it's impossible to see, but meatloaf here is the title of this category. Okay, and the point that was brought up earlier, which is what? What should be the next column? If you're, I know this is not saying enough, but what were we just talking about?
The name of the recipe.
Good. Okay. Recipes are going to be in this table of category, right? But think about this. Is it one recipe of meatloaf? Okay, so there are other recipes like bourbon barbecue meatloaf. There's another meatloaf recipe, right?
Grandma's.
Right, exactly. So this would say grandma's meatloaf. Okay, we should allow more than one. So what this is called is and this is really important with Bubble, it's called a list. And in our case, it's a list of what? Recipes. So what is recipe? A whole new table. Okay, this is a list of recipes. I feel okay?
So it like links from one table to the next, to the next.
Good.
To the next.
Right, that's what I'm showing you here. You have the linking process going on. How do we give a recommendation engine? Well, yeah, we need to have it set up right first. We need a category that has meatloaf as a category, where there could be lots of recipes that fall under the meatloaf category, right? And you would recommend that, someone who's into meatloaf would get one of these, and we might set it up. The best we can do that I know right now is to set it up to pull a random item from this list. That's not much for recommendation, right? Like just pull a random item. Like you can imagine if Netflix says, well, you're into rom-coms. Just pick on it. If you've been watching those, then it would just recommend a random rom-com. Right? They could do better than that, right? They look at how much you watch like of any one, and they go even deeper to say you stopped at this particular point and you rewatch this one more times. So if you rewatch that one, they build what's called a regression, and they make a prediction, which you will learn about in your innovative decision making class. Like there are all these X variables that say like let's make a prediction on Y. Okay, I don't know how to do that yet in Bubble, but we're gonna figure it out. Okay, so a list of recipes goes here in the category. Recipe. What's the first column of recipe? Right? Name. Or title. What's the title of the recipe? Right? The name is bourbon barbecue meatloaf. Okay. So this is the first row. I'm just going to put barbecue here under name. And this is the first row. This is really important, okay? Bubble calls this row a thing. A thing. In fact, they call all rows a thing. That's the terminology they use, okay? So this is just called a thing. Okay? So when you see that in the workflow stuff, it's like make a change to a thing. That's what they mean. They're saying there's a row that you want to make a change to. Okay. This is actual programming talk. I wish they would reframe it to something more English, more like natural, but this is what they use. Okay, so if you say in the workflow, I want to make a change to a thing, what you're saying is, I want to go into this row and change it from barbecue to let's just use a plain old chicken recipe, right? Whatever the recipe name was, barbecue, we're just gonna make a new recipe called chicken. Okay, hopefully we get a little bit more creative than that. Okay, but I made a change to that thing, didn't I? I changed the name of it. What else would you have as a column under recipe? Awesome. In fact, we're gonna break up the ingredients. How about we do ingredient 1? Okay, ingredient 2, ingredient 3, ingredient 4. In addition to the ingredient 1, what do you need for ingredient 1? You have the name of ingredient 1. Might help if I show you the.
Ground beef.
Okay, yeah, let's look at this here, ingredients. So, thank you. Okay, so you need ingredient 1 quantity. Right, so they have olive oil is the ingredient. And the quantity is 2. We should also have a quantity, instead of just the number value, we also need a quantity of the description. So the word tablespoons or teaspoons and so on, right? We need to not only say what the number is, we need to say what the word is. So 2 and then tablespoons. So this would be ingredient 1, quantity description.
So.
Gets intense, fast.
do
Yes.
you Have to repeat that for every ingredient, or could you have like the description just one time in your table and then go to that?
I'll think about it more. I think this is how we're gonna set it up. Just like this. It's a lot. It's a lot of columns, but you need the data to be structured like that for a good reason. Hopefully I can prove it or show you that later. That you need to have these columns for good reason. This says ingredient 1 is olive oil, ingredient 1 quantity is 2, ingredient 1 description is tablespoons. So that's how we would tell it to pull the right information. 2 tablespoons olive oil. We just construct that row with that information.
Going back to thing.
Yep.
Chicken is the thing.
No, the whole row. The whole row is a thing. This whole row is a recipe. So the thing is a recipe. Fields normally. And bubble. Yeah, field. The columns are called fields. So each one of these is a field. This is like an accounting, when accountants came up with the terminology like gross and net profit, same thing for software engineering. They came up with these words field, like you should use column, right? Accountants, accountants like, I feel like they just make it complicated just to make it complicated, so people can't understand it, so then they can't study it, then they can't learn it, then they're like, you're out, you can't learn.
Barrier of entry.
Yeah. Let's make it more complicated. Back to, I don't go too far, but like people make the argument that like that's one of the reasons why we had crises in the past with financial markets, because like no one understands it. Like default credit swap, like someone explain that one to me. I have no idea what that means,
So on the under categories, the first.
Here? Oh, here, yeah.
So the very first row is not called thing, those are the titles.
No, the whole row here is a thing.
We're starting with Hilo, but the one above where you have labels, is that also called the thing, that row? Where you have like the name, username, say.
Oh, no, these are just the names of the fields.
Okay.
So like the names of the fields are here. No, that's not a thing. The thing is the
The
first,
whole row.
the first row and every row after it. Yep. So like 1, this is the first thing in that table. This is the second thing and third thing and so on.
the very top of the field description.
Yeah, yep. So here's how it looks in Bubble. We have a user. Okay, the user table. Okay, we have the user's email, which is a field. Okay, often most apps keep track of the name too, of the first and last name. So here's how we would do that. So we go into user and we create a new field and we call it, first. I prefer when you make new fields to follow this naming convention, all lowercase, and you put a dash in between this to represent a space. So first dash name. Okay. You have to tell Bubble what type of data that is. So when someone types in their name, that's a text variable. Okay. So that's why we're telling it that it's a text. Feel good? The idea, we created a new column called first name. And we told it that it's a text variable. This one over here, is that a text variable? This quantity of the ingredient? No, it's a number, right? And we want it to, we might want to add and subtract to it. We might want to divide that number. We might want to do mathematical operations to that number. So we need Bubble to know that that's a number that's going there versus text. Yeah.
So we would use it like if we want to do half of a recipe,
Yep.
that's when.
Yep. So if we're going to take this recipe and do an operation for a workflow and say cut it in half, or the user clicks, I erased my UX thing, but a user says like make it a half recipe. Exactly. It would just go in and do the operation. It grabs that thing and it says this divided by 2. Okay. If it doesn't know it's a number, it can't do the math. It's going to give you an error message saying like we can't take the word 2 divided by 2. Right? We can't do that operation because we don't understand what this is. It's not a number. Yeah. Like up here first. Okay.
So the only reason we're adding those extra fields for like the different ingredient lines is to make it scalable, so we can then reference information and edit it. Because like if we were for that, wouldn't we just be able to like enter that information as like a simple line?
Perfect. We need to be able to get in here and do stuff with this. Yes. And the only way we can get to that row to do something to that number is if it has its own row. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Would you not be able to set like words to equal like the number 2? As like a in the form of, I don't know, I'm saying Excel, like we set like equals period.
We can't really do it in an application in an easy way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I was gonna ask. Can you do this in an Excel spreadsheet and then import it later?
Yes. The import option in Bubble is limited to paying users. We'll pay for the application, so we could do that. So what I'll probably have you guys do is actually write your recipes in Excel, and then we'll upload the recipes to the database. So you just take your list of recipes and just upload them and be done that way. Okay, so I'll click create.
We click that.
Yep.
Can you walk us through again how exactly that is?
Yeah, I'll do the last name. Okay, so let's go to the data option on the left. You can all do this with me right now too. I think it's good practice. We're clicking on user, making sure we have that highlighted. So that means we're on this table now. We're on the user table. And we're adding a new column called a field over here to the right. And we're going to call it last dash name. And set the field type to text. So we've made a new column, last name. And we set it to text. Every field has to have a data type. You can't leave that empty. You can't leave Bubble guessing what are you going to put in there.
With the part on yours, asks, it says make this data type not private. Where was it?
Oh, yeah. Yep, make this data type private by default.
This shows it is a list for multiple entries. So with that, I would do.
That's this example here.
Okay.
Yep. So when are we gonna use that list option? Well, it's when we create the category. Okay, and we have a category called meatloaf, and we know that there are lots of recipes that go into meatloaf, right? And so we need this to be a list. So that's when we'd select that option. Okay, let's go ahead and make it. Let's do it. Okay, so create a new type, which means you're making a new table. Okay, so you're making a new table and you're gonna call it recipe. I'm gonna call mine recipes with an S, so that I can actually make it because I already have one called recipe. So I'll call it recipes with an S for me, and I'll click create. When I click create, I'm making a whole new table. Okay, so create. You'll notice that a bubble gives them a default 4 categories by default, 4 fields. Sorry, said the wrong word. 4 fields by default. It says for every single thing that you're going to add, for every single row that you're going to add, these 4 things will always be there. Who created it? Right? Who was the person that made that row? When was it last modified? When was it created? What day and time? And what is the slug? You can leave the slug empty. The slug by default is empty, but the slug is the part at the end of the URL. You'll remember, like, that's really important for what we're building here, right? The recipe where the name of the recipe is at the end of the URL. The slug is really important.
That'd be the numbers for.
Yep.
Canvas.
Yeah, they use numbers in Canvas. They also use numbers here. I think there's some rationale into having, actually they don't here. In this particular case, it's just,
Name.
yeah, just name. I've heard that you don't want underscores, you want it to be the dash, so I don't like that. Maybe they're the same. But in some places throughout Simply Recipes, you'll see they'll put the number on it, like here. So the page name is Lunch Recipes, and then they use the number system for the slug. Actually, that's not even the slug, that's the name of the page. So
You were right.
I'm gonna try to ignore that like example altogether. Like, don't even worry about that because that's actually the name of the page is lunch dash recipes dash 5091263.
I was just meaning like that was the name. Slug equals the ending part.
Yep. So the slug would be let's this is a bad example. This is really confusing. The slug would be this bourbon barbecue meatloaf. Okay, the page is recipes. Okay, and the slug is bourbon barbecue meatloaf. All right, so you made the table recipes. How about we give it a name at least, right? So in the recipes table, create a new column or field called, I use title. Just prefer to use that instead of name. And the title would be of type text. Again, because you're writing, BBQ, whatever, it needs to be a text variable. And we're going to click create. No, it won't show up like for what users see. Yeah. Okay. Think if we need any other. Let's just leave that like that for right now. Okay, now let's make another table called category. So you're going to make this one category. So you would go to new type and type in category. And you click create. You got a new table and you just made this table. Okay. I'm just going to backspace because I've already made it. So I'm on this table category and I have fields. I have columns in category. So I have the title of the category, which you need to create. So I create a new field, call it title, and do text. Okay, create. Now, here's where we talked about the tricky part. Okay, you have a category. You have a table called category. Meatloaf is the title of the category, but you can have multiple recipes in a category. So this time when you do recipes, you need to tell it first off, that you're going for the recipes. And this is where things get a little tricky. Okay, this is where it's more complicated. You're not creating a new column called recipes just by itself. I know it feels like that. You're actually, what you want to tell Bubble is that the recipes already exist, and they exist over here. Right? We've already built the recipes table. We're just telling Bubble now that we want this new column to refer to or link to another table. And the way we do that is to scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see the option for recipe because you've already made it. And what that's doing is saying, okay, look, this table of information is going to connect to this table. So I'm not rewriting all my recipes over here. I only write my recipes once, and I tell the categories table to just link to all those recipes. So I click on recipe, and I have to click on this last option too, because I need more than one. I need to allow more than one recipe. So I'm linking and I'm allowing multiple. Next week, we're going to talk more about databases. We're going to go even one step further. Okay, but you just got a really big intro into the database side. Okay, on a real simple example here with, you have a user, users create recipes, recipes are in categories, and this is like real kind of straightforward connection between those ideas. Okay. So I'd click create, and then I'd have a recipes field. Yeah, exactly. That shows a list of recipes. Questions? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So when you do create a field, make sure you type in, you can use any word you want here, but I use recipes. Make sure when you click the drop down, you scroll down and you look for the recipe table that you've already built. I think sometimes people would make a mistake here if you're trying to remember this part and you're building on your own. What you would do is you'd go and type in the word recipe and you get frustrated because you just made another recipe column, but that already exists. And Bubble doesn't do a very good job of warning you that you're making a mistake. So in other words, if I had gone in here and just said recipes and it's a text, I just made a new column recipes here, but I didn't link it to this one. That would not be good. You make a mistake. You'll probably make that mistake when you get back in there and you haven't looked at the video or watched this one or whatever in some time. Oh, I forgot to tell the tables to link up. That's a common mistake. Yeah.
So to kind of help you visually remember that when you are creating a table like that, recipe.
Yep.
Could you always start a table name with an asterisk so that whenever you see an asterisk or recipe, it's referring to your table that you create called recipe?
You might be able to do all caps.
Something-
I don't think you can do an asterisk though. They get pretty picky about
Okay,
yeah.
all caps.
Special characters in programming it's kind of a no-no because the special characters mean things in other places
Okay.
and that can cause issues.
I'm just going back to when we had customers and vendors and QuickBooks.
Yeah.
Sometimes they
Yep.
were the same.
Yep.
You would suddenly use the wrong.
Oh, right.
field,
right.
it would be-
You're treating them as a customer instead of a vendor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because visually they look the same.
Yep.
And then we did something like that where we always do all caps. And all
Yeah.
letters.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So if you've done this all right, you should be able to click on app data now. Okay. So if you go over to the third column in and click app data, you can actually go make the thing. You can make the first row. So let's go to the recipes. Okay, and you can actually make a recipe now because you have the table set up. You can make one. So you can click on new entry and you'll get a screen like this where you're actually making the first row. You're used to doing this in Excel where it just is It's almost too easy in Excel. This is what makes Excel awesome, right? Title and how about ingredient? One. You're used to just typing it in, right? You write the title, you write the ingredient one, and you're used to building out a table. But in Bubble, that process, you know, when you make this row right here, when you make this information is done here. Okay. What do you really want to happen when you build an app? What's really going to happen in terms of the recipe? Well, maybe not so much here. But should you create the recipe? Should you be putting it in the database?
You want it to go
No.
speed, you want it fast.
Yeah, and you might even want it to be user generated, right? Where you all tell me what the recipe is. So what do I need in that case? I need a website, I need a page that allows you to make changes to the database. Right? We're going full circle here on the whole point of today's lesson, which is I need to create a page for you where when you go to it, you can type in the title of the recipe. And when you click that button submit, you create a new thing. Okay, all good? This is like making a post on Instagram, right? When you create a post on Instagram, you're creating a new thing, right? A new row called posts, right? The table is called posts. And one of the fields is called user, right? But it's the stuff that you wrote in, it's the picture that you submitted, and the current user is you, and you show up as another row. When you look at an app in terms of the database, it looks like, oh, man, that's all it is. Like, it's just columns and rows. And it's just shown to you in different ways, right? And Instagram is full screen and it looks like this. And you swipe to the right, it looks like that. I mean, it kind of loses its mystery. Okay, so I made prep time one of the options too. You know, you don't have to do that, 5 stars, that's ratings 5, title. Let's do. Okay, and I would do the slug perhaps as lasagna as well. I make it lowercase. I think it's proper in the URLs to have lowercase. We'll talk more about databases in terms of that needing to be unique next week. Okay, it needs to be unique. Right, this can't exist more than once because we don't want a person to go to a page where lasagna means like 2 different things. Right? It has to be unique. So anyways, I'm gonna click create. So all I did there was I can check this box to say, stop showing me that. I made a new row in the recipes table. I gave it a name, my prep time and so on. And again, we're just calling that a thing. Yep.
On mine, you had 3 boxes to select from.
Yep.
I have type of thing and title.
Yeah, so you have a title, you have this one?
Yeah,
Yep.
prep time, minutes.
Yeah, you don't worry about it. We'll come back to those later. So at least if you have title, that's good. You can just type in the name of some food you like, and pretend that this is a new row in the database. Yeah.
Is there a piece of, like somewhere in the software where you don't have to manually go in and change the rating? So like if people leave ratings on there, it'll automatically average it out?
Oh, yeah.
Star thing?
Yeah.
And I assume we're also gonna put a box where they can enter their own recipe.
Yeah, I don't know yet. I think the whole idea of this class is to treat it much like an MVP in the sense of let's see what happens. Like, let's show it to some people, and then people come back to us and say, why don't you allow us to make the recipe? And then everyone keeps telling me that. Like, you all say, like, everyone I've spoken to says, like, you should be allowed to make a recipe. Like, well, then we should do that. Yeah, I'm gonna say that the base, set of the app features is this. Like, we need to have like,
We're Gordon Ramsay, this is what you want.
yeah, and then let's see what kind of comes of it. Yeah.
I have like a million questions, but one is like just talking about that, do you have to follow like copyright laws, like if somebody recipe publishes it in a book, like it's copyrighted, so how does you like.
Yeah.
create something like this.
I'll ask Kelly when we get there. Yeah.
Recipes are categorized differently legally, so if you have a personalized section of writing, that's why some of your blog posts with recipes actually have this huge like thing about like, oh, my family, blah, 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 because that's what makes it copyrightable. You can actually
Ah.
copyright the recipe itself. What makes it?
Let's do that.
Yeah, yeah.
The like blog component, like you should eat this at Thanksgiving because and
Yeah.
my family always loves this and yeah.
All that stuff.
yeah. Yep, no problem. So how do you delete a field? So let's go back to the data types. And you're clicked on like recipes, let's say. The delete button is to the right, on the far right of that one that you created. Yep. Let me move forward a little bit just to see if we can get this last part done. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get there or not, but we're gonna try to do the whole step here. And if you don't get it, okay, that's fine. We'll pick it up again next class, but we're gonna try and actually make it so that you can get that navigation I described, okay? So, did you all get a recipe in? A couple recipes, hopefully. Okay, and you have a category. I don't know how much the categories are important for this exercise today, so you could actually just leave that blank if you don't have any of them in there. We just want to navigate to the page with the title of the recipe. So all that's really needed is that you have a title to a recipe or multiple recipes in your app. Okay, so let's go back to the design. And what we're trying to make is this thing, okay, where we have recipes that show up. And when we click on it, we go to that page. So the first thing we need is a recipes page. So if you don't have this, you need to create a recipes page, just a blank page. So you need something that says recipes here. So you'd go to like add a new page and type in recipes. You need a page that's called recipes to make this work, okay?
Yeah, big one.
Are we cloning like create a new page that says clone?
You can just do an empty page. Just don't clone anything, just start with an empty page, yeah. And just call it recipes. And so the add page is just right there when I click on that triangle and add new page. And so we want to take users to the recipes page / the name of the recipe. Okay. That's user flow, that's user experience, that's what people expect. That's how we started the class today. So when you click on the recipe, you expect to go to that URL that has that slug that matches the recipe name. Okay, so let's scroll down to some more empty space on the index page, the one that you have been working on. And this time we're going to choose a repeating group. Okay, so you're going to do something different this time. Instead of group, you're going to choose a repeating group. And the reason you're choosing repeating is because you have lots of recipes, right? And think of the repeat as the same style happens over and over again. So you can draw this repeating group box anywhere on the blank spot of the page. Okay, and I'd call what we're in this point right now like intermediate level bubble. Okay, this is things are getting harder now. Okay, we need to tell Bubble where this data comes from for this repeating group. In other words, we need to tell it like where should it be looking in our database. And for this particular exercise, what we're saying is we want to look at the recipes table where we want to show recipes. So when we put this repeating group in, the type of content is a recipe. Let me just make sure I'm gonna delete my extra one that I made. Okay, so mine was called recipes with an S. Okay, so where did I do it? Singular. Okay, singular. All right, so the type of content is a recipe, or if you had recipes, whatever, and click on that. And we want to do the data source is do a search for. Okay, the type recipe. Yeah.
I'm way beyond this.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm on this new database entry. For some reason, I type in the word and it vanishes whenever I click. Suraj. Oh, wait.
Let me come back. I may not have gone through completely. It might have allowed you to do it, but it might still be going away. Let me finish this step and I'll take a look at that one with you.
Yeah, it's not showing up.
Okay, I'll show you why. So let's click on recipe. Okay, and then what it's saying right now is, let's do a search for all of the recipes, all of the things. Okay, so what we just said is, the first thing here in the type of content is just go look at this table. Then the next thing we said is repeats or show to the user all of the recipes. We've given it no filter. We just said, whatever recipes we have in there, like show it right there. The person would be an endless scroll if you had thousands of recipes, right? We just keep going and going. So most of the time you want to add constraints, right? You want to say something to say like filter that list so that you don't show the whole darn thing. But for this example, we only have a couple of recipes in there. So let's just leave it at this. So we'll click close and we have it set up the way we want. We want this repeating group to go look for recipes. Okay. Right now we have it set to 4 rows. We don't, let's just go to 1 row and let's set 2 columns. Okay, this looks more like what we've seen on Simply Recipes. Okay, like there are 2 columns, right? Let's just ignore this for a second. There's 1 row and there are 2 columns. Okay. So let's just pretend like there are no others below it. Okay, so 2 columns, 1 row, and we have the data source set. We're not going to worry about how it looks. And let's go into over here to the side and grab a text element. Okay, and we're going to make sure you drop that text element inside of the repeating group. Okay. Yep. So I'm going to delete this text element. So just now we're going over it. We have the repeating group in, and we're going to click on text. We're going to drop that text inside of the repeating group. Make sure that it's only in the left side and the leftmost, only one over here to the left. Okay. Notice how when I drop that in, it repeats it over here. Okay. This is static text right now, the word edit me. So we just keep showing edit me over and over again. But here's the deal. We want it to show all of the recipes. So that text is going to be dynamic based on whatever row it's looking at. So we actually need to use this option for insert dynamic data. The first time you do this, it feels like really weird what you're doing, and then it gets a little bit more normal every time you do it. Okay. We're going to go grab the current cell's recipe. How does it know which one? It's just doing like the first one. Okay. And then it's going to pull the next one, the next one, the next one. The current cell's recipe. Okay. And it's the title that we're looking to grab here. Again, I know this is hard. This is the first time you've seen it. Trust me on this one. It'll get more natural the more times you do it. Okay. But we're looking for the title. So this text is now going to be dynamic. It's going to change the title based on whatever thing it's looking at. Okay. If you did it right, go into preview, and you're going to see, if you've set up 2 recipes, you're going to see those 2 titles now across the way. Okay, I think I set mine up with too many columns. I don't know why it's showing. I guess it's making 4 because I have more than 2 recipes. But you should see, at least you should see the name of the recipes in your repeating group. Did anyone get it to work?
Can you go back to the formatting of the repeating?
Yeah.
Because I'm like looking up and then I'm like, oh, I gotta do that. And I look down and I look back.
Yeah.
Up, it's been like 3 steps. Like,
Yep, no problem. So let's go to the repeating group here,
got it. Yeah, I'm there.
and let's set it to 1 row and 2 columns, and you're all set.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And then you put a text box in there?
Yep, so I grabbed a text box and I dropped it inside this left one. Yeah.
For some reason, I set it to 1 row and 2 columns, and it's giving me 2 columns and 4 rows. So
Okay. I think it's just because
Oh,
it
is it fixed width? That has something to do with fixed width.
it does definitely has to do with the spacing.
I have it unchecked.
Yeah, so that's why it's allowing more to come on because you're making room for it to grow.
Then you said, go ahead.
You go, because I'm gonna be.
What's up?
So, I mean, this is where you talk about the text being, not fancy text.
Dynamic?
Dynamic.
Yep.
So where did this part and now where we go?
Okay, so so we're at the dynamic. Let me drop in the text box again. Okay, so let me just click out of this for a second, just to show you what's happening. So it's like the words edit me are in there right now, right? And it's just repeating edit me. It repeated a trillion times, right? And we don't want that, right? We don't want a word that we typed in to keep repeating. Unless, of course, we typed in, let me just do it. This is a good example. I'll just type in the word title. Okay. Maybe we want the word title to show up every single time. And you don't have to do this on your step, but just so you can kind of think through what's happening. Let me take another text box and let's do this step together. Okay. Where we want the title, the name of the recipe to change. But we want that word title to stay there every single time. So it's the same way when we look at Simply Recipes cards. Let's say they put the word title above bourbon barbecue meatloaf, right? They wanted the word title to be there. We don't want to do, that's bad design. Like, of course, when you're looking at this, you want the title to show up by its font style. It's bigger, it's black font. And so they don't put the word title there. That'd be ridiculous, right? So they do it just by showing you a visual cue, right? And that's the UI stuff that we talked about last week. So I'm just showing you the word title here just to show you what's working. But that title is going to show up every time. We want the actual name to change based on the database, like what's in the database. So we're going to go to insert dynamic data when we click in this spot here. And we want the current cells recipe name or title. Yep. And yes, it is showing more based on your spacing by how much room you have available and the width of the pixels and so on. That's kind of what we talked about with the UI stuff last week as well, the responsive settings. So
We didn't put anything on that, like last part, when you go to the current cells recipe title and the like drop down bar comes up.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. And other times we will, but this time, no, we're just gonna leave it just at that. And you click preview and you should see some of your recipes show up. Okay. Remember, this right here, like this idea, what you just did is the heart of applications. Like that you and I, again, I know I've said this 1,000 times, you and I would probably see different data, right? Most of the time when you go into Facebook, let's say, or Instagram, you shouldn't see everyone's feed, right? So most of the time when we set a repeating group, we're going to set a filter that says only show me the things that whatever. So like go looking in the database for stuff that I'm associated with.
So I'm gonna get a little advanced here, and this is where you're gonna tie into.
Yeah.
So within Bubble, does it have the ability to say this user constantly looks at vegan recipes? Don't show them recipes with meat. Like, do we, because it's randomized. So we have 800 recipes, but we only have 6 spaces available, right? And we're showing a vegan, this is steak, this is meatloaf, this is chicken. They're not gonna like our website.
We can definitely do that. Absolutely, right? We would just create another field.
Without them clicking a filter.
Oh, yeah, yes, yes, yes. So what we show them, right? So what we just did with the repeating group, right? We would go here and we would add a new constraint, right? And we'd say vegan meals is yes. Okay, and what that means is in the
Would they have to sign in for that to work?
no. No, so because this data right here, let's do recipe here. We would just create a new, let's say vegan. Vegan is a type, is a way to describe a recipe, right? And we would be yes. Okay, so we would only show, we know that the person is, the user only looks at has only looked at these pages, and none of them have anything to do with the category vegan. So don't show vegan recipes. It's going to be tricky, like to do this part, but I think that can be done no problem. The recommendation engine, we're probably going to go looking for plugins for that, where someone else has already built that. We just let me use your plugin to accomplish that particular task.
Does that help, like the artificial
Yeah, I think in some applications you call it AI. I think in others, I mentioned like a regression, the statistical analysis of a regression, just a guess on what we think based on these variables, what you're looking for. Calling that AI is probably not accurate. It's just, but regressions are a big part of artificial intelligence. Like that's the statistics of how it works, but equating them is probably not a good.
Can you ever bring in, like, if you have a spreadsheet of information that you gathered, plop it in that and type every single thing?
Yeah, you can upload. Yep. You can upload the Excel file to a. You have to make sure that it's formatted correctly. It fits the same what you have set in Bubble, but you can absolutely upload a Excel file.
That's like you showed us in that other class. That's great.
Yep. So we pull data elsewhere, then we drop it in here. Yep. What you're asking there, by the way, the better way, like for the sustainability of the app, is to connect via an API. You connect to a data source, right? Another application using an API. Okay, and the API we talked like just very briefly at the beginning of the class. Is it just a different type of software where all it does is communicate data between apps? Okay, just says, oh, you want to use data regarding interest rates, right? For the United States. So like interest rates are a part of your app. So you would just connect to the source that has all the interest rate data, because they probably have an API where they just say, okay, here you go. If you want these things, just connect your application to our application, just pull what you need. Right? Just pull like today's current interest rate.
So like when all these people who are selling airline, they're connecting like with an API.
That Southwest is built.
Right.
Yep.
Southwest
Yep.
Air, so they have real time
Oh yeah.
coming through.
Yep.
And we could do that with this app.
Yeah, there are lots of plugins that have a connection to their, yeah. I mean, that's how those companies make money, right? They realize they're a data company and that their API is valuable, right? That giving you data, access to the data is the most valuable piece of what they do. Sometimes I think, each call on the database you get to pay for. So you better be charging enough on the other end to cover all the costs of having that connection. Right? It's like, is it worth it to have this API connection or not? Because they charge for every time we call the database to request information. I don't know if call is the right word, but I think it is. Like imagine like picking up the phone, like we need that data, and then it's sent over. Okay. We have a few minutes left. Let's give it a shot to go one step further. By the way, this is all recorded, okay? So you can always go back and rewind the spot in the class.
I'm counting on that.
Okay.
So, you know.
All right, no problem.
I'm trying to type. I'm just following my.
No problem. I understand that this is, there are a lot of steps involved and have to go one by one. And if you miss one thing, then you can't go on to the next. So I understand that. The next step is to then try and take an action when a person clicks on the recipe, right? So to complete today's lesson, we said when you click on something, it should be taken to the spot you want. So what we want is that we want this text right here to be clickable, not a button, but this element here to be clickable, so that the person gets taken to the recipes page and they get taken to the one that whatever's in this title. Okay, so let's go back to the data tab for a moment and go to recipes. Okay, you're going to see that slug was created automatically. Okay,
What is the slug?
that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, so let's go to the app data. Okay, go to recipes. Okay, now let's click on the little edit icon for any one of your recipes. So I'll go to this bourbon barbecue meatloaf one. That's the one that matches what was on Simply Recipes. Okay, you'll notice that the slug is empty, okay, on your screen. we're gonna manually type it in this time. But every other time after this, when the app is actually working correctly, the slug can be entered in automatically. Okay, but right now we need to make something. And I'd like you to make the slug, the name that you created, all lowercase, and every space have a dash between it. So if you made a recipe called bourbon barbecue meatloaf, it should be bourbon dash barbecue dash meatloaf. Yeah, one long connected type. You can't have spaces in the URL. So we need it to be the dash is in the place of the space.
And if it's just one word, like the title's just one word.
Oh yeah, so it'd just be bourbon. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so put a slug for each of your recipes. Okay, so we just did the first one. So bourbon barbecue meatloaf. Say you have another recipe, mac and cheese. It should be mac dash and dash cheese. So your question, what is the slug? The slug is the end of the URL. So if you go up here to simply recipes and I clicked on bourbon barbecue meatloaf, look at this part that comes at the end. So this is the recipes page and the last part of it is the slug. All good?
That looks like underscore, not a hyphen.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I mean, this, they must know what they're doing, but what I've ever read is in the URL, you want the dash instead of the underscore. It could be that they're equivalent and that's just their style to do that underscore. The search engine, Google and others, they look for those words, right? When someone's searching on Google for like a very specific search for barbecue, bourbon, these terms, they need to be in your URL because that's how Google says like, yeah, that's what you were looking for. Here it is right here. Okay, so we need it to show up just like that. That this is human readable, that you and I can understand this and it's not some, random code. Okay,
We checked it to make sure our slug works. Or will we
so it doesn't show up unless we set the instruction to do so. That's what we're gonna do now. It should at least show up here. Maybe it doesn't show in your recipes. Sometimes the columns don't show.
see, mine was saying lasagna before, and I put in the actual barbecue meatloaf.
Hmm.
Dash is says that. I was making sure.
Okay. Yeah, so when you click on this edit, it should show up here. And that slug should be good to go there. Okay. Yes.
I am stuck to where none of these have been actually put
Loaded
in
up.
by me.
Okay.
So I have a completely empty table
Okay.
and it keeps disappearing every time I tap. I'm confused.
Go to data types. And click on, do you have recipe there?
It looks different from yours.
Okay.
No, I've got. Yeah, I guess I do. Okay.
Okay. Let me come click your click on the screen with you. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure I'm not missing a step of my own instruction here. Okay. I'm going to show you this one time kind of fast and I'm going to do it again. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of go around and troubleshoot all together at once because this is the trickiest part of the whole lesson. I'm not even sure we're actually going to finish today. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So you double click on this element. Okay. And do start edit workflow because you want something to happen when a person clicks it. Okay. Trickiest part
Where to start? Before we get the tricky part.
right now.
Redesign from there.
Okay, so you should be in the screen here where you've double clicked on this element to the current sales recipe title. You've done start edit workflow. And right here, we're going to add an action. Okay, what I showed you before was to go to navigation and then go to a particular page. We're going to do something else because it's just trickier than what that first option is. Okay, we're going to go to open an external website, and this is a workaround in Bubble. It's unfortunate that this isn't like a natural, normal thing, but there's a reason we're doing it this way. So you just have to kind of trust me here. Okay, so navigation, open an external website. I'm gonna do this one time all the way through, and then I'll go around and troubleshoot with everyone. Okay. Where we're trying to take people to, the destination, we want to click this insert dynamic data. And then type in the word home. And the option you want is website home URL. Okay, that's the name of the app.com. That's what that is. Okay. And then you want to click like underneath here. Just click in the empty space below. And you want to type in the word recipes. If your page name is recipe with no S, make sure that's how you type it in. Mine's recipes with an S. So I'm trying to take a person to simplyrecipes.com /recipes / the slug. Right? And the slug, this is tricky, okay, is also dynamic. Okay, is the current cell's recipes slug. So where am I taking the person? When they click on this element, I'm taking them to another page. Why an external page? Forget that. It's not external. It's still on our website. The website is simplyrecipes.com or whatever the name of your app is, /recipes / the slug that we've defined in the database. Okay, that's the current cells. That's what they clicked on, that current cell. The slug, that's what that current cell. Okay, so we like constructed this URL to send them to. Okay, so let's try it out. So we click on that, we're done. We go back to design. You don't have to go back to design, but you can just imagine now when someone's clicking on this, something's going to happen. So you can click on preview. And you cross your fingers and you hope you're a good developer and see what happens. Scroll down. Okay, you should see that when your mouse goes over the title, the mouse now changes to the hand to indicate that this is clickable. And when the person clicks on barbecue chicken, okay, they get sent to the page recipes / barbecue chicken, the slug. And I set up the recipes page to actually do this part. Yours is just going to be, okay, right? So I set it up, the recipes page to be ready to go, but all you need to know is that you look up at the top, you should see it says recipes / the slug. And that just shows that you did it right. Okay, the only problem is you didn't have a place to send them. I made the page in advance of the place to send them. But all it is, and I'm gonna come around and look at your screen, so we'll kind of pause there for today, is I made this recipes page in advance, and I made these two things in advance before we did this today, so that would work. Okay. And I'll show you how to finish this step, how to do this particular page. But you now have the idea that in the database, there's a recipe, and we constructed a URL from the information in this row to send the person to a particular page. And that's the same thing that happens on simplyrecipes.com. Okay. How did they know what to show here? Notice how it changed, right? Notice how this was different, something different before? How did they know how to do that? Yeah.
This is technically like a website builder.
You mean what we're doing?
Yeah.
It's that we are building simplyrecipes.com. Yeah, absolutely. We
can't do this on Wix.
No, that's we had that discussion, I think, on one of the first days about some of the complexities of like what makes this different from Wix. Yep. Yep.
And that was because we couldn't get the database.
Exactly. The database is the answer, right? The database is the part that all other app builders don't have. And it makes us unique. If we can go to the database to find the information, to construct the URL, to send the person to a particular page, that's huge, right? That's the whole idea of why you build an app, is because, again, the UX part from today, that experience is what should happen when someone clicks on this. First of all, let's just finish here, last couple of minutes on simplyrecipes.com. Let's just stay here, okay? Because I think we lose sight, and I'll come look at computers and try and troubleshoot. How did they know to show these recipes? They can make it random, right? It's simplyrecipes.com. It's the homepage. It probably is pretty random, right? It could be this their top click things. That would be less random, right? Show the things that are getting the most action over the last 30 days. Highest rated over the last 30 days. Okay, that's easy. They're just going to look at the count of how many times that page has been viewed, and they're going to rank these based on that number. All good?
It looks like they have a category for fall too.
Yeah, do it by time. So category, they have a recipe has a season. Okay, so they could even just be showing the filter based on the season. Okay, so this is the website, simplyrecipes.com. It's the index page. So this is the same thing we've been working on in Bubble /index, right? We made the home page. We created this repeating group. Notice how these cards repeat. It just keeps showing the same thing. It's a picture with a category, with the title, with the time to complete, with the rating. Okay. When a person clicks on any one of these recipes, they should be taken to the recipes page. Okay. And the recipes page should not just be like random, but is the one I just clicked on. And the URL matches the title of what I clicked on before. The most important part here too, there can't be two butternut squash enchiladas, right? Because how would they know which one to show? So there can't be two slugs in the database that are the same. Just like most of the things you experience with Canvas, right? And your identification here at the university, there can't be two people at this at your university, FGCU, with your UIN, right? That would be a complete disaster for our systems, right? Yeah.
Does Bubble prevent us from using duplicates?
Sometimes, sometimes they have it where they definitely do it with users. They're good with users because they get it. That like usernames, emails, for example. A new user goes to sign up for your app and they type in an email that already exists. Bubble has it pre-configured to say, hey, this email already exists in the database. You can't use this email. Like that's a pretty straightforward common case. There shouldn't be two emails. There shouldn't be a user or two different users, sorry, that have the same email address. Okay, so they prevent that from happening. Okay. So there can't be two butternut squash enchiladas. When you come to this page, the title matches that slug and the rest of the recipe follows. Okay, how did that come to be? It's a workflow. It's an experience that we created. And the rest of the information is just pulling from the database. So can you imagine a field called description of recipe? This is it, right? Isn't this going to change based on what the recipe is? Yep. Okay, so this is a column called description, and it will change based on the URL, based on the slug. Butternut squash enchiladas is not going to pull a random recipe. It's only going to pull the one that matches that particular title. Okay, so it's scanning through the database to find the information to make all this work. The picture, it shouldn't show you a picture of, hot dogs. It should show the picture that matches the database for the recipe and everything all the way down. Okay, one page called recipes where all of the rows get shown on that one page. Just like when you go to Facebook, there's one page that you're scrolling down, right? Except your version of that page and my version of the home feed are different. Do you see it, the connection now? Does it feel a little bit like more concrete? The natural tendency, by the way, when you go to build in Bubble is you want to create a page for every recipe. Do you see what I'm saying? Like your natural inclination when you build in this environment is to go, okay, there's a page for butternut squash enchiladas. I got it. I know what to do. I'll go into Bubble and I'll make a page called enchiladas. No, I'm telling you, don't do that, right? You shouldn't have a page called enchiladas. You should have a page called recipes where you show enchiladas, lasagna, all of the different things, right? And they all get shown on the recipes page. Big difference between the two. It's hard to get in the mindset of thinking like, oh, I just need one page that shows rotating content. Yeah.
So the recipes page is only has here, but then slug is the actual page.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. You got it. Perfect. Yeah.
And then every time that you want to go to that recipe, you're literally rerouting out into.
Yeah. The person's based on their action, whatever you set for the UX design, like whatever you set for what should happen, it just goes and searches for a different thing.
So then technically when you did that URL, it comes back and it goes to bubble.io and you keep going with your individual things. So
Yep. The only reason is right now I haven't set the domain. At one point in time when we get done, we'll actually purchase, we have the domain name now, but we'll just rename it from Bubble.io to whatever our, I think it's gonna be like Southwest Florida Cookbook or something like that.
So it does that now because we're kind of.
They're testing. Yep.
We build our own personal website. We show up as part of the domain. Other people will not ever really know that we're in trouble by looking at the
No.
URL.
No, they might know from, if they're a good technical person, they might be able to like, yeah, go and like do the background. And you know that inspector thing in Chrome I showed you? Like a savvy person could go in and go like, oh, this is made in Bubble. Like they can figure it out. Well, no, like normal user is gonna know that you made it in Bubble.
So if we're basing the website off like user generated content, wouldn't we run into an issue with like the slugs being based on the name of the build when if like you run into like common meals that maybe a lot of people have different recipes for, like on the Simply recipes, there's like baked chicken parmesan, like I'm assuming that's a pretty common recipe.
Yeah.
But would it be like each person has to come up with a more specific name instead of just that?
I love your question. It's perfect. You all follow them? Okay, so how do they handle it? They don't take user generated titles, as far as I can tell. They don't allow you and I to make a recipe. Maybe they have to be approved, whatever. But in any case, when Sally Vargas goes to create this butternut squash enchiladas, yeah, she has to come up with a unique name. Yeah. Yeah. They don't have to be, you can make the slug more, you can make the slug different from the title, right? So I could add this to the slug. I could add underscore that, right? And remember, if you use letters, they're 26, 24 letters, 26? Ugh, 26, I think.
26.
For a while, I was thinking 24. Now I'm certain it's 26. All right, let's say there are 26 letters in the alphabet. Okay, this is statistics. Okay, and I'm getting them all mixed up now. Commutations, permutations, I think permutations. Okay, so if there are 26 options for the first letter, right? And you have more, right? So let's say you take 6 characters. Okay, so there's one. This is character 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 26 options it could be for this one, 26, 26, 26, 26.
Does each one could be a letter or number?
Yeah, if you do that, but if it's just A through Z, right? Okay, and you're combining A through Z, A through Z, A through Z. There are 26 options of the first. So the odds that a page would get duplicated would be 1 to the 26 to the 6th power. Okay, and so not going to happen, you know. And how do they do it to make it higher? Then add characters in, right, and numbers. So 1 to 9 adds it, instead of being 26 options, you have 26 plus 9 because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so you have 35 options. So these are ways to make it so that it's like never going to happen. Yeah, you just assign random characters to the end of the slug, and some websites you'll see have a slug that has like 20 characters and then mixtures of letters and numbers, and like that's never going to.
Go to Google search everything.
to like the 10th page.
Yeah, yeah, it just goes on for like forever, so that it won't repeat.
So 300 people.
Yeah, so like the odds of that ever happening are so low, but you can also set the check, the condition. If this already exists, don't let it happen. To the point of like the user's emails as exact match, then we just won't even do it. We won't even let you make it. So that's how you make sure for certain that it absolutely will not happen where this URL is repeated. I was gonna get to that anyway. I know it was a really long answer, but like I was going to talk about this anyways at some point in the class, so just took care of it right then. Yeah.
So like going off of when you said about like if you have a bunch of people creating a big chicken farm, can you like actually make another that all have to do, like if you had enough of it where people are, you know, so that we, like, I'm just wondering, like, 'cause if you're letting people, my mind's wandering.
Well, this is a hard one to solve. You gotta think of different options.
Slow.
So
So
what
if,
I'm thinking though is like from a standpoint as a user, like I don't wanna go to a website where I have 800 recipes that are so similar, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some point. then it
You're saying
becomes-
there's butternut squash enchiladas, wrong one to land on here.
We're talking is like the. you
There's
know,
version A, version
yeah,
B.
or chocolate chip cookies, or, you know, everybody, you know, people have like these variations, if we're letting people upload their own recipes to it, after a while, it's gonna become very messy for the user. because
Yeah,
they have to
There's
do
25 different ways to make chocolate chip cookies.
Right, and
right?
at some point, who cares?
Yeah.
I want cookie now.
Yeah,
yeah, then you organize it by
So-
rating, by people who click on it, by all that stuff, and then you can title a slug based on the user who uploaded it.
yeah. So
if John uploaded John, he has the highest rating.
I think it's the only way to solve
Yeah.
what you just described is
That's what YouTube does.
you have to find creative ways to make one rise above the other. To the rise, see, I was
Yeah.
connecting that in. Screw that up.
So do you leave them all in that one big thing called recipe, or do you start to sub them out and say?
No, we would have one big recipes.
Or you could have
yeah.
a zillion, because I mean, by the time you have all those. different-
Yeah, so it could end up that the title is the same, exact same, right? It shows chicken and chicken, same rows, but the uniqueness is the slug. And yeah, a person can get to the same recipe. We should challenge ourselves on this one. I would actually challenge you guys, like try and find it on simplyrecipes.com. See if you can find another one with the exact same title. Let's figure out how they do it. I mean, this is what we're here trying to figure out. Like, what is the user experience? Like, what should it be? I'm posing it back to you as a challenge of like, well, when they made the app, they had to ask themselves the exact same questions. Like, well, what do we want to do when it's the same? How do we want to handle that? We got to figure it out. I don't know. That's a user experience question. What do we want it to be like? I'm shocked that we got through that. There's a lot of steps in that last one, and I think a few people got it, like got to the page. Okay, great. Obviously, you want to go back and watch the recording on this one to see what were those steps involved. I'm gonna hang around now just to go out and look at people's computers. So if you got it up and you face something and throughout that exercise where you're like, I got stuck, you want me to look at it now? I'm more than happy to, review the site. But otherwise, let's pause there for today.
Promise me you'll never